Good evening. This is CTV News for Thursday, March 21st. I'm Rochelle Metzger. Thank you for joining us tonight. The House advances a transportation funding measure last night that will gradually apply a new sales tax to gasoline and raise millions of dollars in new revenue. A final House vote is expected on Friday. If it passes, it then goes to the Senate. In an exclusive interview this morning, Patricia Vallone spoke with Senate President Mike Miller about the pending legislation.
We're unified in terms of an approach, and hopefully it'll get done, and we can get some of the bridges done that we contemplate getting done. But we're unified in terms of a plan.
And how much, if any, of your original ideas are packed into this?
I would say 75%. But what I provided was a menu. I said, look, pick and choose among this. Also, I said, look, let's come up with a regional plan. Let's come up with a regional plan for Baltimore, regional plan for the Washington metropolitan area. So those areas that are impacted would pay for the blue line, the purple line, would pay for the red line, rather than the rural areas, which they don't get the jobs, they don't get the economic benefits, and they rejected that. They rejected at this point in time the sale or lease of the ICC. And in terms of naming rights, that would have freed up $2 billion in bonded indebtedness, would have made $250 million in cash right now. But those ideas were put aside, and this is what we've agreed upon. And it's a tax increase. Nobody likes it. It doesn't poll well, but it's a responsible thing to do. And leaders lead, and it's just something we're going to have to do at this time.
And is the constitutional amendment to create a dedicated funding source off the table completely?
No, but what it is, what I also proposed, again, part of the menus was a lockbox, which was an amendment to say guaranteed that none of this funds could be used for any other activity except transportation. The only way they could do that was for the governor to declare a financial emergency, and it had to be a 3/5 vote on the House and the Senate side. They didn't want to get amending the Constitution part, and so they made a different provision, but we have a lockbox provision as well.
Supporters of the measure say without an increase in the gas tax, Maryland will run out of money for new transportation projects after 2017. Opponents say the legislation will raise the cost of more than just gas. They say many goods that need to be transported to stores will also increase. Well, tempers were flaring in the halls of the State House this morning. Prince George's school board members confronted legislators about a plan to shift power away from the current board to the county executive. The changes include taking away the board's ability to hire a new superintendent for the school system.
Ultimately, they've done it in other places. They've done it in Los Angeles and in other big cities, and it's worked fine. Recently they did something in the District of Columbia. Even though there was a new mayor who came in, he still hasn't gone back to the old way of doing things. So something's working, and sometimes, in order to make change, you have to do some changes. And I think it keeps the school board intact, but it also helps them deal with the budget process.
We put in an original piece of legislation to develop a task force to look at best practices for school board operations. The school board, quite frankly, opposed that. Since then, the county executive has made a decision to revise that particular piece of legislation with a proposal to separate out the superintendent from the school board, put operations at the county executive level, and allow the school board to focus on academic achievement and parent involvement. Essentially, I think the county executive made a decision that from a timing perspective, it was necessary to do now because of the impetus of the new superintendent and the decision to hire a new superintendent.
3 days before we were scheduled to bring our community members, have our community members interview the superintendent, this bill was announced. And the school board didn't get a hard copy of the bill until Monday, and it was not even from the county executive. And so essentially, we have 3 candidates. One lives in Durham, one lives in Chicago. It's not right to have them move their families here if we're not sure if this bill is going to pass or not. This essentially halted our superintendent. It was intended to halt our superintendent search process. But we're going to continue to move forward because that's the law. But I think there's a way of doing business. There's a way of governance. And if this is your ideology, fine. Let's take it to the people. Let's talk about it. Let's have community forums. Clearly something needs to happen. But what that is not what this bill does.
The proposal also calls for 3 appointed members who can vote to be added to the board, as well as 3 non-voting representatives from institutions of higher learning. Meanwhile, County Executive Rashawn Baker unveils more details about his plan to shift school system leadership. If passed, Baker says the integration school governance measure would allow him to select the next superintendent and appoint those new members to the board. He says the proposal would give the next leader more control over operations and greater access to government resources. Current board members would still serve their districts, but in a reduced capacity.
One of the things we'll be able to do is people will know who to hold responsible for education in the county, and that's the county executive. But it will also enable us to do what we've done in other departments of the government, and that is to make sure we're streamlining the resources of the school system and the county government so that we can direct more dollars into the classroom. Right now we have a school system where they're running the largest bus system in the county. They're running the largest procurement system. But it takes their focus away from what they really should be focusing on, and that is education.
Now, if the bill is approved, county residents would see the changes in the next academic year. A 55-year-old Maryland man is killed in an early morning accident in Gaithersburg. Montgomery County Police say around 6:30 this morning, the victim was attempting to cross the street near Clopper Road and First Field Road when he was struck by a school bus. There were no students on board at the time, and according to reports, the man was not in a crosswalk.